When you are doing guard duty on a dark hill on a cold, windy night in the Judean hills in Israel, you are delighted to be there with another soldier that you can schmooze with. One night, I was assigned the 2 a.m. shift, and I met the reserve soldier I'd be doing guard duty with. I said, "What do you do?" He said, "Well, I'm getting my PhD in math." I was pretty nervous this was going to be an very boring evening. Yeah. To tell you the truth, we had amazing conversations, and he actually shared with me an anecdote which I want to share with you. He shared with me there was a mathematician and an economist that were in a rowboat. It was a special rowboat, and every time you rowed it, you would move half the distance to the island. Well, the mathematician quickly did all the calculations and figured out in an exasperated cry, "We'll never get there." And he said, "Forget it." The economist quickly grabs the paper, does the math, and says, "We'll get close enough and then we'll jump." And that kind of describes where we are this evening at this time in the Jewish calendar. You see, tonight is the 49th day of the Omer. Saturday night, starting 8:30, we will celebrate Shavuot. And the holiday of Shavuot, of course, is the 50 days after Passover, also known as the Pentecost. Pentecost in Greek means 50th day. There's a mitzvah, a positive commandment to count the 49 days, starting on the second night of Passover, that lead up until Shavuot. So let's count together. This is the final count of the Omer. So the blessing is as follows. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat ha'omer, who has commanded us concerning the counting of the Omer, and we say Hayom, today is 49 days, which totals 7 weeks of the Omer. So during these 49 days, we prepare ourselves for Matan Torah, for the giving of the Torah, which we celebrate on Shavuot. Though we had already received freedom from Egyptian slavery, we were not yet ready or able to understand what it meant to receive the Torah. Nowadays, we still count these 49 days in our excitement and anticipation for receiving the Torah on Shavuot. Okay, I know probably someone over there would think, "Rabbi, 49 days, 50 days, come on. One day, what's the big deal, right? Are we not close enough?" Maybe the idea is one day is a big deal. One day can make a big difference. You know, baking makes me quite nervous. Mixing the ingredients is not that hard. Actually, I kind of enjoy that, a little this, a little that. What makes me really nervous is when to take the cookies out of the oven, right? It says cook between 8 to 10 minutes. Well, I don't know. When I'm watching it and I'm nervous, that 1 minute makes a huge difference when attempting to make the perfect chocolate chip cookie, right? One day, 1 minute can make a big difference, whether baking cookies or getting ready to receive the Torah at Sinai. You know, even though we have calendars and reminders on our computers and on our phones, we love to count. And this is the other idea of counting. Not just so that we're properly prepared, but we love to count. There's actually an app called Dream Days. Anybody familiar with Dream Days? So what it is you can use this app to count important moments in your life. For example, if you're in a new relationship and you can count, we've been together for 247 days, right? Or summer vacation's coming up, so you're counting down 47 days. We love to count. It's a lot more fun than looking at a calendar. Why is that? Because it seems that counting has an emotional factor in it more than anything else. And the deepest truth is that we don't just love to count, rather counting expresses our emotions. Counting helps indicate what we love. For example, if it's your wedding anniversary and you say, "Wow, we've been married a long time," right? Your spouse may not be quite as pleased as compared to announcing, we have been married for 32 years, right? Likewise, if you keep a record of how many states you visited or how many books you've read or how many times you've seen your favorite movie, what you're doing is actually expressing your love. And we actually learn this from this week's Torah portion, Bamidbar, where God is taking a census. There they are in the beginning of the book of Numbers, and God tells Moses, take a census. Let me know how many are in my nation who are journeying through the desert. And Rashi is kind of confused by this. Why does God want to count? And he explains the rationale like this. He explains that when God counts, he's counting out of chibah, out of love. And that is what counting is all about. The act of counting is how God demonstrates divine love and affection for each Israelite. God gets nachas, comfort and joy, in the counting of each of us as we are freed and we're on our own journeys towards the promised land. You see, Numbers tell stories. Counting 49 days tells the story of our accepting the Torah. Taking a census in the desert tells the story of our journey to Israel. And this is why the Hebrew word for story is sipor. The Hebrew word for book is sefer. And the Hebrew word for number is mispar. They all share the same root, samech pei resh. So counting and telling stories are intertwined. Numbers tell stories. So tonight, we mentioned those 4 Israelis. We mentioned that they were brutally murdered on Wednesday evening in Tel Aviv, and their names, Ilana, Michael, Ido, and Mila. Their story tells us about what it means to create a thriving state of Israel in a region that's full of violence and hate. Tonight, I think about our own country. When I see all the polls and statistics on the news, and I try to remind myself that these numbers, these statistics, are actually telling the stories of our citizens, of who we are, and I try to take into account the dreams of who we want to be. Tonight, I look at our 18 volunteers from the archive who are recovering our history and discovering the stories that started 163 years ago here. And tonight we welcome our 21 TI Fellows. What's their story? It's intertwined with our story, our community values, our interest in their own professional development, in the future of Memphis, and the future of the Jewish people. To conclude, to count is to love. I learned this lesson at 4 a.m. on a cold, windy night on a dark hill from a reserve soldier who happened to be getting a PhD in math. He was guarding over us, protecting us, demonstrating his love. He was paying attention to the numbers and the stories behind the numbers. The good news is that we don't have to have a PhD in math to lissaper, to tell the stories behind the numbers. Just as God lovingly counts each person, so too we must also lovingly count each person, each blessing, and each challenge in our lives. Shabbat shalom.